Hey guys, welcome back to releasethecraftin. Priscilla here, kicking off by retroactively doing my goddess jewelry series. I don't have a proper name for it yet, but I decided that I was going to make a piece of goddess-inspired jewelry for every one of the bargain bead boxes I get this year, and I'm going to start with this one because this is the one that sort of kicked off the idea. This is actually the box for February, and in the comments, my friend Joy had said that the box was giving Circe vibes, and I was like, you know what, that's actually a really good idea, and sort of reframing it made me like this box a little bit more. I felt a little bit more inspired to make something with it, so I leaned completely into the idea, and then reflected on the fact that in the January box, I did make something Aphrodite themed, because I just felt like that was the vibe for January's box, and I didn't actually talk about Aphrodite. I just said this is the thing that I'm making for Aphrodite, and I felt like it was a really cool piece, and so I wanted to sort of continue the vibe. So I am making a piece inspired by Circe today, and then I am going to make another piece inspired by Aphrodite so that the series will be complete, or not missing a piece, where I will make a piece of jewelry and then tell you a little bit about the goddess in question. So if you guys would like to hang in with me and watch as I make some jewelry and learn a little bit about various goddesses through the year, that's what we're going to do. I already posted my bargain bead box unboxing for this month, for the month of March, and you guys have left a couple of cool ideas for goddesses I could pick to go with the March box, but I still haven't decided yet. So if you haven't seen that video or you haven't commented, I would jump over to the March unboxing video and leave a comment about what goddess you think that box looks like or you'd like to hear about in relation to that box, and I will pick one and make a piece inspired by that goddess, and we'll just keep this going for the whole year. I think it's fun. I think it's going to be a fun challenge, and I love the idea of having a bunch of different goddess pieces out there in the cosmos in this space. So I think I've rambled on enough about what I'm doing here, so let's get into it. Let's talk about Circe. Circe isn't actually a major goddess. She is a goddess for sure, but she's not a major goddess. She's actually considered to be a minor goddess. She is the goddess of magic, enchantment, and transformation, and that's very, very on point for Circe. She is considered more to be an enchantress than a goddess, but she is actually immortal. She is a goddess. Even by the way that the Greek pantheon is structured, usually the children of Titans are considered to be gods and goddesses, and she is in fact the child of the sun god Helios, who is actually not a god. It is the Titan Helios. And it's believed that her mother is an Oceanid, which is an ocean nymph named Percy, or Perse. I don't know how that's pronounced. There's some other theories about who her parents could be, but the most agreed upon is that her parents are Helios and Percy. There is like one allusion in the Orphic Argonautica that her mom is Asterope. And her brother is Aedes, who's the keeper of the Golden Fleece and the father of Medea that you hear about in the tale of Jason and the Argonauts. But it doesn't seem to be like widely accepted that this is the case for her parentage. Most people seem to agree that her parents are Helios and Percy, so that's what I'm going with. Her role as an enchantress sort of comes about by the fact that all the things that they have written down about her involve her doing some enchantments. The fact that she is the goddess of transformation is very, very on the nose for her, in fact, because her most famous stories take place in the Odyssey. When Odysseus comes to her island, she lives on an island called Aea, and Odysseus stops on the way back when he's trying to return home from the Trojan War, and she decides to turn all of his men into pigs. And he does manage to convince her to change them back, mostly by sleeping with her, but it works, and she does eventually turn his crew back into men, but it's also implied that a lot of the animals on the island are men who have stopped there, and she has turned them into animals in order to protect the nymphs that she shares her island with. So she's like very protective of her girls, basically, and she just turns all these men into animals that reflect their character. She implies that a lot, which is why she turns these men into pigs. It's very pointed what she's doing. There's also another story where she falls in love with a dude who is some kind considered to be a sea god, sometimes just considered to be like a demigod, named Glaucus, who wants to marry Scylla. And he wants to marry her so much that he's not even like acknowledging Circe's love for him or her attempts to woo him. And he ends up just sort of spurning her to the point where Circe decides that she is going to get revenge on Scylla, who is a nymph as well, and she poisons her bathwater, and it ends up turning her into a monster. So Scylla is said to have 6 dog heads that have emerged from her waist, and she's supposed to have like serpents, or her head is turned into a bunch of serpents. It's not really agreed upon what Scylla actually looks like, but there are some snakes and some dogs involved, and it's a little bit of body horror she does to this poor woman just because this other guy doesn't love her. So every time we see Circe in a story, someone is getting transformed, and Scylla gets turned into this huge monstrous type creature that actually becomes an obstacle in the Odyssey that they have to avoid. They have to avoid Scylla and Charybdis, which is a whirlpool that used to also be a nymph, but now is just a giant mouth eating up things in the ocean. So, terrifying imagery aside, sometimes Circe is a girl's girl, and sometimes she's not. And I think that's fair. People go through evolutions, but by the end of her life stage, she has decided that she's going to be a girl's girl and protect the girls on her island and turn men into pigs. And honestly, I kind of want to live on that island. There is another story where there is an Italian king named Picus who also resists her advances. So she's like flirting with him, and he's like, no, thank you. And so she turns him into a woodpecker for turning her down. And honestly, she's a bit of a menace, and I also kind of love that as well. It's interesting to note that Circe was really feared, particularly by menfolk. A lot of it is because of what she represents. She is a very powerful, independent woman who doesn't need men. She doesn't need them at all. She has her own castle, her own island. She has her own power. She's also sexually liberated. So it's said that, she takes lots of lovers and then she just leaves. She doesn't need to keep them. And that's, in the context of the times, very intimidating. It actually makes her what they call the archetype of a predatory woman, because she's kind of vicious. You know what I'm saying? Like we already heard about how she goes after guys, and if they tell her no, then she's like, you gotta go, or I'm turning somebody into some kind of animal or monster. So like the role that she plays in mythology is actually very interesting, and not something that you see a lot of, especially in Greek myths, where you see a sexually liberated woman who has her own agency and power and doesn't get punished for having this mastery over herself, her own agency here. And her role as an enchantress is a fearsome one. It's not just like, oh, she's a magical person who does magical, like, witchy type things. People are scared of her. They don't want to wrong her. They don't want to get on her bad side because she has such a powerful sort of alchemical control over the laws of transformation, which I think as women is also really empowering. And you can kind of see that vibe from her in the way that women are able to take something and turn it into something else. She sort of represents the darker nature of that, where women can take something that might be generally conceived as good and turn it into something that's a little bit ugly and hard to look at, because they want to, they have the ability to, and it's our choice as women to determine how we use that ability to alchemize things into other things and transform something into nothing, or vice versa, nothing into something. I think Circe sort of represents the control over that ability, and the ways that it can go. It can be used for good, it can be used for evil, it can be used for something completely in the middle in between. Now, every time Circe appears in mythology, she's not doing particularly witchy things. Not every single time. A lot of the time she's doing particularly witchy things. Sometimes her role as an enchantress or as a magical person is in a sort of high priestess-like position. So she does take that archetype as well. When Jason and the Argonauts show up to her island, they come with Medea, who is said to be her niece, via Aedes, the king of the place that he's the king of. I totally just forgot. The Golden Fleece King. His daughter is Medea, so Medea is said to be her niece. But they come to the island in order to have Circe help cleanse them of the crime of murdering Medea's brother, Perses, in order to get away from King Minos and his army. Not King Minos. King Aedes. King Minos is somebody else. Oh my gosh, I'm all over the place now. In order to get away from King Aedes, Medea ends up chopping up her brother into pieces and tossing him into the ocean so that her father has to pick up the pieces of him so that he can be properly buried, because if they don't get all the pieces, then he won't be able to cross the river Styx and go on to the afterlife in the underworld. So it totally derails their pursuit of Medea and Jason and the rest of the Argonauts with the Golden Fleece, because they have to collect all these pieces of her brother. So when they get to Circe's island, they have her conduct the ritual of cleansing to help absolve them of the sin of doing this horrible act of whatever it's called when you murder your brother. And for the most part, it works. She gets absolved. And so there's like another role there where Circe is called upon to be the high priestess and conduct this rite for them. And they go to her because they know that she has the capability to sort of get this forgiveness for them in the eyes of the gods, which is pretty cool. I would say if you are into Circe at all, you will probably already know of, or if you aren't into Circe at all but are into art, you probably already know her famous paintings that John William Waterhouse did of her. He did a couple of paintings of her. They're very iconic. I would definitely recommend to go look them up. You've seen them before, I guarantee you. You probably just haven't known that that person was Circe, but she is. She was actually one of his favorite subjects, so she appears in a couple of his paintings. And I will link a video in the description box for this video that has a like super deep dive on Circe and like the etymology of her name and where her origins might be predating her role in Homer's Odyssey and the Greek mythology sector. There's actually a lot of really interesting information here that I didn't have the time to cover in this video. So yeah, that's gonna be it for me for right now, you guys. I will catch you all in the next one. I appreciate your faces. Happy crafting and goodbye.